Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 81.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 81 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's guest is Kirk Yatras. He's the VP of Firearms Owners United in Australia. And you know how we get the people on the left, telling us over here that it's only Americans that like guns, that other countries have it all figured out and they love gun control and they're more sophisticated and enlightened and it's just us crazy Americans that like guns. Well, one of the things I wanted to do when I started this podcast was dispel that myth. And I've been reaching out to gun rights activists throughout the world and inviting them to be a guest on this show. I'm really excited to have Kirk on. We talk about his experience growing up in Australia with the transition from being a pro-gun state to how the gun control laws were enacted, the dirty tricks the media pulled when they were trying to get these laws passed, the tactics the government has been using to further restrict gun rights without passing new laws, and Kirk's efforts to resist that. So excellent episode. Hope you check it out. Head over to the show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/81, and you'll find links to GoFundMe page for Kirk and to Firearms Owners United. And of course, it is today's show sponsor, Gift for Gun Nuts. Head to giftforgunnuts.com and you'll find our Amazon affiliate links to some really great products for gun owners, for firearms and hunting enthusiasts on your shopping list. So, Out of Order, James Kalita here, and now here's Kirk. Kirk Yatras, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here.
Hey. So, Kirk, you are the VP of Firearms Owners United in Australia. Would you tell us a little about that group?
Yeah, sure. So, we're a relatively new group on the scene here in Australia. Previously, a lot of the other groups have had more of a sporting focus in terms of advocating for firearm rights and so forth, and we're really starting from more of a political vantage. So we started in 2016, I think it was, when there was a shotgun getting imported to Australia called the Adler lever-action shotgun, and lever-action shotguns are pretty much a non-thing in the US, but in Australia they've become a thing because they banned pump-action shotguns. So a company in Turkey called Adler started making a lever-action shotgun. One of the distributors here, called Iowa, picked them up with an initial order of 5,000 and started bringing them over. They were selling pretty well on pre-order. And, yeah, basically a bunch of anti-gun activists in the country freaked out, and the government of the day, seeking to get some good publicity for them, the government in Australia being fairly anti-gun, as a general rule, decided that they'd just ban them on the spot. Now, the initial reason they banned them was they said the capacity was too high, so they were originally coming with a 7-round tube magazine, and they said that they wouldn't let them in with anything over 5, so they are allowed in with 5-round magazines. So they, at the factory, they changed them to 5 rounds, and they all came in the country anyway.
So, I guess the myth that Americans were told is that in 1994, Australia banned guns, and the entire country just sort of had this enlightenment where they discovered they didn't need guns anymore. And so what's the truth? How much of a gun-owning population do you guys have?
Yeah, well, if you actually look comparatively, the rate of ownership of firearms in Australia is, by international standards, relatively high. It's a big country, and even though the population is fairly heavily urbanized, there's still a strong rural component and still a strong hunting culture in the country. So it was 1996, there was the Port Arthur massacre, and John Howard, the Prime Minister at the time, decided that he'd jump in and introduce these new gun laws. And this is something the federal government had been working to introduce for some time. The bureaucrats under the Keating government had actually, which was the prior government, there's two major parties here, Labor and Liberal, both of them hate guns. And the Labor Party Prime Minister had these laws drawn up, but was just sort of waiting for the right political impetus to bring them in. Liberal Party Prime Minister comes in 96, massacre happens, and he says, well, he's got the political will to force them on the states now, and that's what he did. Using those laws that have been previously drawn up. Now, like, the idea that everybody went, oh, that's okay, is nonsense, I was a kid at the time, and I still remember marching in a protest rally against that with my parents, and, there was quite a few thousand people there, and it received no coverage in the media. It was very, very biased coverage in terms of how they did it. They took some photos before the event and after the event, basically, when there was just a couple of hundred people milling around, and it, buried it as deep as they could. They did that all around the country pretty consistently. So laws got rammed in. The federal government basically said that they'd withhold fundings to the states. Now, there's no registration in a lot of states, so they realised, I think, that if they wanted anybody to comply in those states, then they had to pay out some fairly decent prices, and for most guns, they were paying well above market value. Some they were paying under, but most were pretty generous. And a bunch of people handed their guns in. But a point I'd probably add is even the federal government's own crime bodies estimate that there's several 100,000 conservatively, and realistically it's probably upwards of 1 million unregistered semi-automatic rifles in the country still.
Wow, that is good to hear. As I interviewed a gentleman who wrote a book on France during occupied Germany, and they talked about how people, when they were told to surrender their guns, they buried them in the woods, and they were just going through all these different measures to save them. So I'm glad you guys kept some, because I found on YouTube the videos of the protests, and I saw those giant piles, dump trucks of firearms.
Yeah.
That was horrifying. So you have a case going on right now where, like the other thing, we always hear, we just want this one new law. We've been hearing that same thing for the past 40 years, but they're trying to put even more restrictions on you now. Is that what do you have going on now?
Well, that's pretty consistent, mate. There was the major gun ban in '96, and they brought in, which was on semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, and pump-action shotguns, and in handguns in 2003 they brought in major restrictions on handguns. So they're still legal and able to get, but they brought in like magazine capacity limits, barrel length limits, and stuff like that. And then obviously there's been a few other bits and pieces tacked on there over the year. Like you said, it's one new law, one new restriction to keep us all safe or whatever, even though none of them really have any real justification or achieve anything meaningful. And so, we've got a case at the moment. So basically, a manufacturer in Australia back in 2016 now, 2016 started making what you'd refer to as an AR pistol. So semi-automatic, chambered in 300 blackout, 10-inch barrels as a pistol sort of thing. I know they're fairly common in the US, with you guys having, what do you call them, braces? Just kind of an amusing little thing.
Yes.
But so similar sort of concept. We weren't running braces or anything, just coming with the pistol buffer tube. Anyway, so I got one, being a keen gun lover, and I had that on my pistol license here in Australia, which is hard to get, but you can do it. And it was fine. For 2016, all of 2017, no issues. Mid-2017, I got a weird call from the cops saying, we're getting some conflicting information about these from the dealers and stuff that are registering them. Could you send us some photos of it? And I thought to myself, well, the story's telling me it's probably all bullshit. But they want photos of it because they want to know what it is. And under the law, they have a power to conduct a mandatory inspection of my firearm. Well, to demand that I produce them. And I was like, oh, fuck, I don't want to play hard here, otherwise they'll just make me show up at somewhere inconvenient. So I took some photos and sent them. And never heard anything more of it until basically June 2018. I got a letter in the mail, and basically everyone else that owned them started getting letters in the mail saying that, we've decided to reclassify them, and we shouldn't have issued the permits and we're voiding them, essentially. And you've got to get rid of them. So you could give them to the police to hold on to, or take them into your dealer. So that was a bit annoying. We had a fair idea it was coming on, though, because one of our members of Firearm Owners United contacted us saying he had a PTA and for what's termed a permit to acquire, which is the permit you get to buy a gun, and they weren't rejecting it, but they weren't approving it either, which is always seems to indicate something funny is up. And yeah, so we had a bit of an idea this might be coming, and then sure enough it did. Got the letters, and yeah, we started a crowdsourced fundraising thing, which we've raised about 15 grand in, and now we've got a few legal cases underway on the matter.
Excellent. And is the ground that it? I mean, so what's? I mean, there's probably the fear that they'll reclassify it, or so. How are you defending it?
Yeah, so they haven't written any new laws basically to try and ban it at this point. So, that's probably a good thing. The existing laws, in our opinion, they don't have the power to actually classify firearms. Okay, they are classified under the regulations that have been passed by Parliament, and they sort of fall under that, but the police don't really have any authority to say, well, we don't really think this is fit, so we'll move it over there. It is what it is. If it's a semi-automatic rifle, then it's category D. If it's a semi-automatic pistol, it's category H.
Right.
So basically the legislation's got some technicalities about it, but we think we've got a pretty good case to say that it is actually a category H firearm, not a category D or a category R firearm. The technical knowledge of firearms within the police force is pretty abysmal, to be honest, and we've seen as much from their submissions on this case so far. They can't even identify firearms correctly or anything, really. They referred to a Remington R4 as a Remington AR-15 semi-automatic assault rifle, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
I think Colt would be a bit upset if Remington started selling AR-15s and branding them as such.
Yes, I think they would. Yeah. Not to mention all the scared deer with the R4. Yeah. So, how is self-defense viewed in Australia? Do you presumptively have the right to self-defense? Can you use your firearm for self-defense? Okay.
Yep. Okay. It depends on state as to the exact circumstances that you're looking at, but generally in every state, self-defense, in some situations, provides you with an exemption to break other laws. So normally, for example, if you use a firearm on a residential property or something like that, you'd be breaking the laws against not discharging, but you'd have a out with most self-defense laws in most states. My home state of Queensland is quite positive. You actually have not quite a castle doctrine set up, but you have the right to use force that you believe necessary to remove someone from your premises if you believe they're there to conduct an indictable offence, which is like burglary, robbery, assault, whatever. So you can, basically the case law on that is you can forcefully eject them and use lethal force to do so, as long as you believe as long as you reasonably believe that that's necessary. And they sort of draw the limit when, criminals try to plead then of being setting people on fire in their driveway and stuff like that and try to plead self-defense. No, no.
Okay.
Like, that's ridiculous. But, so that's my state, but other states are a fair bit less positive, and they will regularly charge people for using firearms for self-defense. And there was a case in New South Wales fairly recently where basically a bloke had someone show up on his front door with a piece of wood or a plank, or I can't remember if it was a knife or whatever the hell it was. He was on a rural property. He retrieved the firearm, and did that call just drop out? Is that good?
Oh, we're good.
Oh, we're good. Okay, sorry, my internet is not ideal. Anyway, so he retrieved the firearm and basically pointed at the bloke who showed up, who turned out to be like a 17-year-old drug addict or something. Basically said, drop the weapon, get on the ground sort of thing, and held him there until the police showed up, or he took him to the front gate and waited for the police to get there or whatever. And they took his guns off him and all the rest and were looking to charge him. And eventually I think they decided they wouldn't, but it took quite a while. And that was no shots fired, nothing. It was just for you thinking that he could use a firearm to stop someone breaking into his home.
Wow. And did Did they eventually give him his guns back, or was that just a...
Yeah, they did eventually.
Oh, they did. All right. Yeah. Well,
It took
it's
months.
unfortunate. It took months, right? And probably $10,000-$20,000 dollars in legal fees.
Know what he spent.
Yeah.
He would have had to. And his wife had a firearms license, and they basically placed a condition on her that she couldn't have firearms in the house either. Because obviously they can't be trusted because they wouldn't let themselves get robbed or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So are there regions where you can carry a firearm like daily for self-defense outside of your home?
For normal people, no. Absolutely
Okay.
not in any state or territory. Now, there are some exceptions for special people, right? So if you're really well politically connected, you might be able to get a what's termed a commissioner's exemption, which can act as a concealed carry license, but like a handful of people have them. I do know someone that's got one, but, he's just has friends in high places, I guess. I wouldn't be able to get one, and just about anyone else can't.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so the actual ownership of a firearm for the purpose of self-defense, broadly speaking, is actually illegal in Australia. So, it's specifically declared that you can't own a firearm for self-defense. It's actually really funny with the security guard laws, is that you can't own a firearm, like a security guard can't use a firearm to protect a person, right? It's not kosher. But they can use a firearm to protect money or jewellery and stuff like that, valuables, which is kind of a bit of an odd priority that you say, you can use a firearm to protect $40,000 in cash or something, but, human life, nah, that's not worth anything or whatever.
Huh. There's a couple of states over here that are like that, but they don't go so far as to put it in writing. It's sort of, you just have to piece it together. But you guys, wow, they actually put it in writing. Huh. All right.
Yeah, not good enough for self-defense. And
so you mentioned you have two, the two major parties are pretty anti-gun. Do you guys have, do you have hope? Are you trying to change one of the parties?
So the Australian political system has a few minor parties in it. So a few of those, we've got the Liberal Democrats Party. They're sort of a right-wing libertarian party. You have the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. Shooters in the name, you kind of have an idea that their ideology. They're more a rural-focused party. And you have One Nation, who's sort of a nationalistic right-wing party, who are fairly popular as well. So you got a few minor parties that are relatively okay, but you just get swamped out by the major parties, really.
Yeah.
I mean, at times, the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party have held the balance of power in New South Wales, which is, the balance between basically choosing who can be government, whether it's the Labor Party or the Liberal Party, and helping them pass legislation and things like that, and they've been able to have some wins down there.
So even though they had the balance of power, they couldn't select a governor in the Shooters Party?
No. So they,
okay.
So, well, yeah, I mean, they could, I guess, have reneged and switched the government over, but then you've got, two bad choices. It's kind of hard to get anywhere.
I know. So what are some of the things that you guys are working on with Firearms Owners United?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of stuff. So we're trying to do a lot of grassroots stuff to help encourage people to vote for more friendly parties. We do submissions. So there's a few states in Australia and territories and stuff, and every year or so one of them will have an inquiry or whatever into something relating to firearms, whatever it may be, and we'll make sure to provide submissions to that and lobby members, and then we try to get people mobilised for elections to help get more friendly parties in power, and also working with governments where they're willing to work with us. We had our team in Tasmania, which is one of the states here, had some good success last year and this year with the Liberal Party government that was down there, in terms of reaching out with them and cooperating with them. But unfortunately, their work was kind of a bit sabotaged, you could say, just by political happenstance, which is unfortunate. But, so we've had some positive relationships with police ministers and so forth where we can, in terms of trying to bring about some change. And because there's the major things that are hard to make headway on, like bans on semi-automatic rifles, or effective bans on semi-automatic rifles, and stuff like that. But there's so many more other niggling red tape issues that it just boggles your mind how restricted everything here is. And stuff like that is kind of what we're attacking at the moment, because, it's very, very hard for them to justify to the public why they need these sorts of restrictions, because they're just nonsensical.
Yeah. And so what is the process like? Is it, if you someone woke up tomorrow and said, I want to buy a gun, what do they have to do?
So basically, it depends what they want to buy. So if they just want what's termed a Category A/B firearms, that's basically your bolt-action rifles, your break-action shotguns, lever-action shotguns, stuff like that. That's going to require them to work out why they need a gun. Now, if they just want a gun just to have it, then that's not good enough. If they want a gun to protect their home, that's not good enough. If they want a gun to shoot targets with at a shooting club, they can do that. If they want a gun to go hunting with on a private property they have permission to hunt on, they can do that. Now, they're going to need to join either a club or provide a letter of permission to hunt and complete a mandatory safety course in firearms handling, and it's more about legislation and storing things safely and stuff like that anyway. But yeah, complete the safety course, join a club, pay your licensing fees, and then wait anywhere between 2 months to 6 months, 8 months, and you'll get a license in the mail. I waited 8 months for my initial licenses. So I did my my Category A/B rifle license, and my Category H, which is sort of your pistol license, at the same time.
Wow, that's incredible, and I imagine that really discourages new people from getting involved.
Oh yeah, that's what it's about. The laws by and large are not about so much protecting people; it's just inconveniencing firearm users and dissuading them from ownership. Really, it's about the process is the punishment.
So, is there still illegal arms traffic for criminals in Australia?
Oh,
I know the answer before I ask, but yeah.
Yeah, look, and that's the funny thing about this. My AR pistol, or what was termed the Wedgetail WT-15 that the police now have possession of. It was 6,000 Australian dollars, which that's a lot of money. That's probably, I think, it depends on what the currency is, but it's probably like $4.5 grand US at the moment, I think. Because they're made in small numbers and so forth. I could have bought an illegal AR for that, Probably got an illegal M16 or something, And definitely an illegal SKS or some sort of submachine gun or something like that. They're not that expensive. I don't have any illegal guns, though, because I sort of have quite a few legal ones, and I don't want to take the risk on them, and I don't have any real desire to. But if I was that way inclined, it would be less risky for me from a personal level in terms of having the police involved, because they wouldn't know I had these things.
Right, unless you had to use one, and then.
Yeah. I mean, I live on a rural property, so shovel and shut up. But
gotcha.
That was a joke.
Yeah. Great. So, suppose, in the individual states, how much, if you had the ideal government in your state, how much of a change could you make, and how much are you bound by your federal laws there?
We're not bound at all by the federal laws. If we had a good state government, we could completely tear the whole thing up. The only issue would be importation. So the federal government has absolutely no power over state firearms laws. Under the Constitution, they basically, they don't hold that power. They hold taxation powers and border control. So there is actually quite a big difference between what you can own in the country as well and what can be necessarily imported into the country legally. And so the federal government could stop you from, say, importing stuff, but they can't really stop possession of it in the state. Back in '96, they were able to bully the states into it by saying that they would withhold funding and so forth. Which, from my understanding of US law, your Supreme Court has actually ruled against those sorts of measures where the withholding of funding isn't connected with some sort of political, justification. But in Australia, it's not. So they could have just withheld all the funding to the states, and the states basically have no real means to fund themselves.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh. Excellent. Interesting.
Yeah.
So
But I don't think the political will's there anymore to try those sorts of tactics. So.
Gotcha. So, what I usually ask my guests if there are books they recommend for gun owners. Any come to mind?
I'm just trying to think. I can't remember the autobiography of what's his name, the U.S. Marine sniper that made that shot with the 50 BMG in Vietnam. What's his name? Carlos Hathcock. His autobiography was pretty good. I'd recommend reading that. There's a few technical books I've read, but I wouldn't really recommend them unless you want to do gunsmithing stuff.
All right. So, how is it for American gun owners that want to come visit Australia? Is it advisable? Can we come and hunt? Can we come and shoot? Or
yeah,
we stay out?
Provided you want to shoot with a bolt-action rifle, yeah. Sort of depends what you want to shoot as well. So there are some companies that do, this is a really funny point of the law, okay? So if you're an American and you want to come to Australia and you want to go hunting, say, buffalo or pigs with a 44 Magnum handgun or 4.54 Casull, whatever handgun you want, basically, you can get permission to do that in the Northern Territory, which is one part of the country, and do that through a like a safari sort of company and do a guided hunt. I can't get permission to do that, so it's illegal for me to go hunting with a handgun. So, if you're an American that comes over hunting, you have more rights than the locals do, by and large.
Wow. That's crazy.
Definitely strange.
So, what can we do to help you guys over there? I'm going to put a link to your GoFundMe on the show notes page. Firearms Owners United.
Donations always help. We sell some merchandise. I don't think we do international shipping though. So, yeah. Donations to the GoFundMe are great, or just sharing the stuff that we put out there is pretty good. Legal cases are pretty expensive. We're in the low cost stage at the moment with this stuff. We haven't brought any solicitors on board yet because we're engaged in QCAT, which is the administrative tribunal. So you actually need special dispensation there to use a lawyer, which kind of works to our advantage because we have better legal and technical knowledge than the police do, and they're not allowed to use the Crown Law Service without dispensation.
Oh, all right, excellent.
Which is kind of funny, but. The thing is with QCAT, as one of the solicitors we did consult with over approaches and stuff, is he says basically a kangaroo court, and it can go any which way.
Gotcha.
So we'll see what happens there. We might need to appeal. If we have to appeal to the Court of Appeals, that's a proper court, and you have to bring a lawyer and a barrister, and that's an expensive exercise.
Right. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I will share those, and I thank you very much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
Oh, honestly, fight while it's good, because it's a lot harder when it's bad, man. It just sucks. I see a lot of American, Facebook pages or just sales and stuff like that, and if I lived there, I'd probably be burying half a dozen AR-15s in the wood every year.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for being on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 81 of the Out of Order Gun Rights podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/81, where you'll find links to Kirk's GoFundMe page and to Firearms Owners United. And don't forget to check out giftforgunnuts.com and check out all the cool gifts we have for the firearms enthusiast on your holiday shopping list. Out of Order, James Kalita here, and we'll see you next time.